Americans will need to start digging a little deeper into their pockets because the cost of living is up. Figures released by the Labor Department show consumer prices are on the rise, led by food and fuel cost. Joining me now in the studio with more on the rising consumer prices, Meyer, senior U.S. economist at Bank of America Merrill Lynch. Michelle, welcome to Bottom Line. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Mark. Nice to be here.
How bad is this?
Well, obviously the increase in food and energy prices is concerning because it eats away at disposable income. It means as a consumer, you have to spend a certain amount on gasoline every month. You have to spend a certain amount on food. They're not discretionary purchases. So it means you have less money to allocate towards those items you would like to spend, certain services, certain goods, a new shirt, a new luxury item.
Are we starting to see inflation just below the surface?
A little bit, but it really only subdued inflation right now.
Okay.
If you looked at the core inflation print, that was only at 0.2%, and most items within that are still showing very little price increases. The areas that saw an increase were vehicle pricing, for example. That's a lot more sensitive to high commodity prices.
Yeah.
But if you look at most services, you're still seeing very low prices, if not outright declines in certain areas.
Tell us how this is going to affect consumers. We did an interview yesterday. We talked about, there was a hearing on Capitol Hill about how this economy is affecting the middle class. For folks who are driving to work, for folks who are thinking about taking that summer vacation, specifically about fuel prices, how is this going to affect them?
It will certainly act as a drag. Again, if you live in the suburbs and you have to commute into work, there's a certain amount of gasoline you are going to consume every month, and now you have to pay more for that gasoline. So it hurts consumer spending, it hurts consumer confidence, and it's a drag to the overall outlook. The good news that's starting to emerge is that commodity prices appear to be coming down. We've seen a pretty sharp drop in oil prices over the past week or so. And
but that drop in commodities prices, does that automatically translate then into inflation on the horizon?
The drop in commodity prices ultimately will lead to a drop in gasoline prices, and that will bring down inflation over time. So if it's sustained, it means that we may be seeing the peak in headline inflation now.
Okay, peak in headline inflation. Is the Fed taking notice of this? You know, we've been hearing about possibly QE3. It's being whispered but not shouted from the hills. What's the Fed to do right now?
I think the Fed is very much taking notice of this. They're carefully monitoring inflation and other types of drivers of inflation. They've been saying for some time that the increase in commodity prices is transitory, which means they won't react with monetary policy in this environment. And it seems to be that they're probably right. Commodity prices are now coming down. Inflation expectations are starting to slip. University of Michigan consumer inflation expectations are contained. So I think it means that the Fed is going to look at the growth side, and the growth side still is pretty soft, which means they're going to keep monetary policy accommodative. I don't think they're at the point of QE3 yet, but I certainly don't think they're ready to start tightening.
I want to mention, because you wrote a column for us in the Bloomberg brief, it was last month, it says multifamily construction may boost housing market. I realize that this is less than a month removed from that, but is that still your thinking?
It's very much still. If anything, I think we're at the very beginning of that process. We're seeing, as I wrote in that article, and thank you for mentioning it, we're seeing a shift in demand towards the rental market, and that's very supportive of apartment buildings. And inventory is actually pretty lean in certain metro areas for apartments, so it means that there should be an increase in construction for multifamily homes.
And it is indicative, as you said, that maybe we will have more renters right now, because then single-family homes will suffer because people won't be able to get a mortgage.
That's exactly right. That's a shift. There's a shift from home ownership to rental that's going on, largely because of the credit environment, but also the perception around home ownership's changed now that home prices have fallen so much.
On the horizon, as we go forward for the next several weeks and months, what's the overall economic picture look like? What metrics are you using?
I think it's a picture of continued recovery, but a slow recovery, and one that's going to have bumps along the way. You want to pay a lot of attention to the consumer. It's 70% of GDP, and right now the consumer is facing a lot of headwinds, as we discussed. So if you see a bigger pullback in spending, I think it's indicative of a slowdown in overall growth.
Is it just a question now, Michelle, that consumers, what discretionary income they do have, they're still concerned about spending it, maybe not going to get that car, maybe not purchase that big ticket item because in this environment they're still concerned about their jobs?
I think that's right. You can see if you look at consumer sentiment, we're seeing some gradual improvement in confidence, but over a long history, we're still pretty much in limbo between recession and recovery according to those metrics. And the savings rates picked up as a result. So I think consumers are being more cautious.
That's not necessarily a bad thing, is it? That's because if you look at trends over the last 15, 20 years, Americans typically were not saving a lot, but it seems that now they've been forced to do so.
That's right. It's a good thing in terms of the long run growth in the economy. In the short term, though, it means that people are spending less, which means slower growth.
All right. Michelle Meyer, Senior U.S. Economist, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch. Thanks for coming in. I appreciate it. Thanks so much.